Welcome to the show, folks. I'm Gregor and this is a brief dissertation on a what-if for World of Warships. In this instance, being naval vessels of the Romanian Navy. This might seem like a topic that came totally out of nowhere, but the date of this video's uploading is one that has some significance to some Romanians, as October 22nd was the date the Romanian naval forces were founded. The idea of Romanian ships being implemented in World of Warships is an interesting one, and it's not one without any support, but that support is rather limited, and might easily be dismissed by some. Still, as far as the Romanian subscribers I do have, you all might find this an interesting topic that you already have some knowledge of, and for everyone else, the details of the Romanian Navy during the early 20th century might surprise you. The gameplay footage in the background is of some time I spent in the Arkansas Beta-class battleship. Now, we do eventually lose this match, but you guys don't get to see that, because the footage serves its purpose. Geographically speaking, Romania has always been in a unique position to obtain a navy. This is because it borders the Black Sea to its east. It's always been within arm's reach of Russia and what was once the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. A factor that the Romanian Navy to this day holds a great deal of responsibility for is the Danube River, which extends throughout most of Eastern Europe and forms a very large part of Romania's southern border. Romania was never able to industrialize as quickly as the other major powers of the two world wars, mainly Germany and Russia, but it still had a modest fleet of ships dedicated to the protection of the Danube, which were in the form of river monitors and destroyers. Those destroyers were fairly large, more like light cruisers, but those contained perfect characteristics for patrol ships. Following Romania's inclusion into the Soviet Union, any of its newer ships were of Soviet origin, but a couple of these Romanian-made vessels did see continued usage. What of these ships that were designed and built in Romania that could be implemented in World of Warships is a hard question because a vast majority of the ships Romania fielded during the early 20th century just weren't suited for deep-sea combat. And the documentation on the ones that do exist is rather limited and difficult to dig up for anyone who doesn't understand Romanian. And there's not enough tech in the form of ships that did exist or even blueprints to yield a full tree from Tier 1 to Tier 10. What could be implemented would be the destroyers, specifically 2 of them, likely as premium ships. There are a number of ways these ships could be incorporated into the game, but I think the most likely option would be to make them premium ships of the Italian tech tree that is probably coming to the game at some point, since these ships were built and designed in Italy. These 2 ships are called the Mirage D class and the Regale Ferdinand class. The Mirage D class destroyers were destroyers built for the Romanian Navy at the onset of the First World War, requisitioned into the Italian Navy during the war. 2 of them were sold to Romania following its conclusion. Those 2 ships then served in the Black Sea during the Second World War as part of the Axis powers, and were primarily responsible for convoying supplies. One of these ships was responsible for sinking a Soviet submarine in 1943. Both of the ships were made a part of the Soviet Navy when Romania was included, although that's a bit of a polite way to put it, into the USSR. The Mirage D has characteristics comparable to that of other lower-tier destroyers at around Tier 2 to Tier 3. She can move at about 34 knots in a straight line, and would have a set of guns, comparable in caliber to the Japanese 120mm, but she'd have a good deal of those guns too. 2 mounted in dual-barreled turrets, and 1 single-barreled. The downside to this would be her torpedoes, at least in number, as it only carried 4 tubes. I'd assume 2 on each side. That's not a lot. And at 457mm in caliber, probably only comparable in damage output to the Americans. However, a very interesting distinguishing feature about this vessel is its anti-aircraft armament in the form of 4 76mm cannons. Yeah, you heard me right. I think this is pretty neat since the only form of anti-aircraft capabilities any destroyers at these tiers get are just machine guns and really nothing worth mentioning at all. If this ship were to be implemented in World of Warships, I think it would make sense for it to be a part of either the Italian or German tech trees as a Tier 2 premium ship. The rationale would have to do with the flags she flew. At the beginning of World War I, she flew an Italian flag, but in service with the Romanian Navy, she would have been an ally of the Germans. And there's no real chance of implementing a Romanian tech tree in full anytime soon, like I said. Aside from that, I think the Mirage D would function pretty well. If the range and the handling characteristics of those guns were any good, this ship could be a potent gunboat. 5 guns is a larger amount of guns than the Japanese, American, or Russian destroyers at tiers 2 and 3. and with a respectable top speed and decent anti-aircraft capabilities, it could serve as a good escort of larger ships as well. The other contender for a Romanian ship would probably be the ship more or less meant to replace the Mirage D, the Regele Ferdinand. She was commissioned following the conclusion of World War I by the Romanian government to help further modernize the Romanian fleet. Also pretty big for a destroyer, and the reason being, she was based off of the British destroyer leader Shakespeare. Destroyer leaders, as you might imagine, were built to be the flagships of destroyer flotillas, and as such had larger space allotted for armament, among other things. These ships were considered fairly powerful for the role they encompassed. Speed comparable to the Mirage D at 35 knots, as well as her main battery of 5 120mm, and she keeps her 76mm cannons, but gets 2 additional 40mm, and 2 triple-tubed torpedo launchers this time for a total of 6 torpedoes. The torpedoes are at a higher caliber as well, at 533mm. The Regele Ferdinand participated in a number of operations during the Black Sea campaigns of World War II, allied with Nazi Germany, just like the Mirage D did. This ship could probably function as a decent Tier 3 ship, in essence a slightly upgraded Mirage D. She'd have the second highest speed of any Tier 3 destroyer, slightly under the Japanese Wakatake, as well as torpedoes of the same caliber as the Wakatake, but she gets more of them, 6 opposed to 4, and of course, she has more main guns and more potent anti-aircraft capabilities than any destroyer at her tier. A lot of the other soft stats for these ships, like turning speed, rudder shift time, what have you, they might be more difficult to dig up for someone like me, but I'm sure the historical department at Wargaming can dig something up. If nothing else, adjust them for balance reasons. So in conclusion, Romania was obscured in history over the course of the 2 world wars by the more predominant naval powers like Germany and the United Kingdom, but the navy that did exist in the Black Sea was built with a specific purpose in mind, and its ships served their purpose. There's something to be said about the resourcefulness of the Romanian engineers who built the ships of the Danube River. Situated with the Red Bear several hundred miles away, the Romanian fleet had to accommodate the possibility of an intrusion into Europe by way of the Danube Delta, as well as strategic control over the Black Sea itself. Romania had a sizable force during the early 20th century that was, at the very least, something that had to be contended with in some capacity by her enemies, and that tradition of self-defense from the Danube River continues with the Romanian Navy to this day. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more content like this. My name is Gregor Havener, and as for my Romanian audience, mulțumesc foarte mult. Thanks so much for watching.